Good day, colleagues. Welcome to the stakeholder engagement on reimagining the scope of the profession of psychology. Thank you so much for giving of your time to be here today. The objectives of this meeting are twofold. Firstly, this initiative hopes to canvass opinion on the scope of practice from psychology professionals and students across South Africa. It also aims to reimagine a more relevant psychology. Hence, the focus of the meeting is on going forward. Today's engagement is one of a few regional consultations hosted by PsySSA to discuss models for the profession of psychology, such that the Professional Board for Psychology may consider these in deliberations on the changes needed for scope of practice. The scope of the profession of psychology has been highly contentious since its promulgation. As you may be aware, on the 14th of November 2016, the High Court of Southern Africa, Western Cape Division ruled. The regulations defining the scope of the profession of psychology are declared invalid. It ruled further that the order of invalidity is suspended for a period of 24 months. Colleagues, this affords an opportunity for the Minister of Health, the PsySSA, and the Professional Board for Psychology to correct the defects in the current scope over the next 21 months. This moment provides an opportunity for all of us in psychology to make representation to the Professional Board for Psychology for changes that will ensure that the defects created by the current scope do not plague our discipline in the future. This moment also enables us to reimagine psychology so that the greater needs of our growing and diverse population are meaningfully addressed. In deciding on what may be the best way forward, it is important to be cognizant of the current scope and where it came from. The original scope of profession document promulgated by the 7th Board in 2008 may be accessed at the link provided. Subsequent to this, a document was promulgated in September 2011, which amended the 2008 regulations to provide further clarity on the scope for each of the categories in psychology registered with the Health Professions Council. These documents replaced a 2003 document by the 6th Board, which was not a regulation. The 2011 document defining the scope of the profession may also be accessed at the link provided. At this point, colleagues, it is important to note that I have undertaken this initiative as the President of the Psychological Society of South Africa in the interests of the profession of psychology in South Africa. These models in this presentation are only proposals, which are meant to engage the profession in constructive discussion on the way forward with regards to the scope of practice. These models have not been endorsed by anyone. This is an initiative that is independent of the Professional Board of Psychology at the Health Professions Council of South Africa. Colleagues, there are 4 models proposed on this slide. The order of the models by no means indicates any particular preference. These are models that PsySSA members have provided feedback on and that have been discussed by other stakeholders as well. PsySSA has decided to present these as a starting point for the way forward in terms of reimagining a more relevant psychology. As we go through the next slides, each of these models will be expanded on. On the slides, you will note points in red. These were points that were added as the Gauteng stakeholder meeting progressed in relation to the comments raised at that meeting. Model 1, colleagues, is to keep the scope of practice as it is with the guidelines that the board has always said that they will produce. So the board has consistently been informing us that further guidelines which provide clarity on the scopes of practice for each category were being developed and would be released. This process was overtaken by the court order and is untenable. The 2011 scope of practice is already an annexure, and adding further guidelines has the potential of confusing the scopes even more without resolving the defects. Model 2 would be to keep the scope of practice as it is, but combine all the existing documents. If the board wishes to continue with the current scope, the 2011 annexure, and further guidelines which address current defects, it would be best to promulgate these as a single document instead of having 3 different documents. Model 3, to keep the scope of practice as is, but introduce core competences for all psychologists. What do we mean by that? Is to keep it as is, but introduce core competences for all psychologists regardless of category, and this would include the research and organizational psychologists, and then have specialized skills for each category. At the Gauteng meeting, colleagues, it was suggested that referring to scope of practice or scope of profession was possibly inappropriate given that we are trying to imagine something new. Hence, it was proposed that another term be devised with a proposal for practice of psychology. And then, after that, look at what the core competences would be. For this model, it is envisaged that the categories as they are specified in the SOP remain, but a single document be promulgated that specifies at the onset what the core competences would be for all psychologists. It is not unusual for this to be done. In fact, we do have starting points from which we can go. One of these is the International Declaration of Core Competences in Professional Psychology, which was adopted by PsySSA in July 2016. The link to this is provided. The New Zealand guidelines on core competences may also be consulted, and the New Zealand guidelines represent an attempt to take the International Declaration and adapt it for that context. A Model 4 is also proposed, which involves more radical change than all of our other models, in that it proposes that we change the scope of practice and training qualifications such that the master's level training allows for a general psychologist, similar to a GP, and all specialized training occurs at a postmaster's level. It was suggested at the Gauteng meeting that we may have to consider other exit levels for the general psychologist other than a master's level training, hence the postgraduate training in red. It was also noted, particularly by universities, that this sort of change would involve not just change of the scope by the board, but would involve training institutions having to deal with other bodies like the Council for Higher Education. Although it may seem like a huge departure from what we currently have, it is not unusual. The Psychology Board of Australia has a similar model, and these documents can be viewed at the link provided. As the meeting progressed in Gauteng, there were further models that were added to the current models that PsySSA proposed. There was a Model 5 that was proposed, which said that we keep the 2008 scope, but we disregard the 2011 annexures, and instead we include the competency clauses on the ethical rules of conduct for practitioners, that the document of 2006. A Model 6 said that we should keep the SOP categories as they are, but we need to start training in the first or second year. A Model 7 was also proposed in the closing comments, which said that we consider changes to the SOP such that we bring in an exit level, possibly assistant psychologist or similar at the honours level, and then we proceed with a Model 4 type way forward. In addition to the models proposed, colleagues, we also discussed transverse registration. Transverse registration is the term used by the 6th board for those psychologists who wish to register in another category than the one they were currently confined to. Once successful, they were registered in the new category, giving up the old one. Whatever the model adopted, or whatever combination of models adopted, it is necessary that the board consider some form of transverse registration. At the Gauteng meeting, it was also proposed that the board consider community service for all categories. A concern was put forward is that if any new model is introduced, how will the existing cohort of psychology professionals and students in the current system be catered for? Importantly, colleagues, it is necessary that we reimagine psychology to meet our country's needs. Hence, in the reimagining process, it is important to get a model or a scope of practice that will not only meet the needs of the profession, but that will also meet the needs of the society. Thank you.